Hey, what's going on, everyone? Thank you for coming to watch. So I've got guys an update on a really intense day of severe weather that we've got ahead of us today. All right, we're talking about a really serious damaging wind event that is expected to unfold across portions of the upper Midwest. Really confined around the Chicago area, but we're going to be talking about the impacts with that as well as why this is going to be such a major event. All right, we're about to see some really, really significant wind gusts, and you can see we already have some convection that's going on across the country. Just some pretty light convection, just some clouds starting to build up. But believe it or not, yes, this is the beginning of our big event that we've got that's about to unfold today. So starting out here, take a look at your satellite. You can see that we have a pretty good bunch of clouds here. That's where our low pressure is starting to form. All right, this will continue to organize and to mature as it moves over to the east. Once it gets into like the northern Illinois and then maybe as far west as eastern Iowa, once it gets to that area, I do think that we're gonna start to see that low really start to just strengthen and get its act together. All right, and then you've got a secondary event that's in front of this. All right, there is a little boundary here of some strong winds, kind of stretching down all the way down into like portions of extreme eastern Kentucky. All right, there are some pretty strong winds that are coming down from Canada. All right, there are some very strong winds on the backside of the storm. But then you also do have just the entire system here kind of just moving its way through the Great Lakes. We've been seeing some storms earlier this morning. All right, and then also some storms down into the Gulf Coast areas near like Louisiana, right, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida near the Panhandle. We've been talking about some stratosphere storms out there. So some waterspouts, believe it or not, are definitely possible down there as well. All right, so let's take a look here at your alerts. All right, so starting out here in the Northeast, we have a lot of alerts to talk about. We'll start out in upstate New York, just to the west of the Finger Lakes region. We do have a severe thunderstorm watch. That's in the pink shade. It's going out for areas up towards the Great Lakes here, like along the Great Lakes coast of upstate New York, if that makes sense. But that's in western New York State. Also going up into a few counties out there into northern Pennsylvania. That's the pink shade. All right, all along the East Coast, we're talking about pretty intense heat where we do have heat advisories in the orange shade that's going out from southern Maine down through Vermont, New Hampshire, um, going into Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, into Long Island, Southern New York State, New Jersey, PA, Delmarva, and then really all the coastal regions of like Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina does go a little bit farther into the state. All right, but that's pretty much where our biggest areas of heat are located as for the east coast of the United States. But you can see in these purple shades, the this is where you have the excessive heat warnings. All right, you can see that we have excessive heat warnings for south central sections of New Jersey, portions of southeastern PA, especially near the Philadelphia area. All right, a lot of areas near like DC and just the Delmarva region in general. Some counties out there are currently under excessive heat warnings. All right, also areas of North Carolina are currently under excessive heat warnings. Excuse me. But for the rest of the country, you can see out for the central United States, we have in the orange shade. All right, you've got heat advisories. It's going out for areas of really all of the lesser or just like the southern half of the Midwest. Also going down into the Central Plains, you've got all Kansas, Oklahoma, northern Texas. You've got portions of Arkansas. You got western Tennessee. All right, you've got Mississippi. You've got Alabama, northern Louisiana. But anybody really, I'm just gonna say anybody in this orange shade, you're currently under a heat advisory. A lot of spotty areas currently under excessive heat warnings, just like areas south of Omaha, Nebraska, near in this purple shade that also does include some areas of southwestern Iowa and this little batch of counties out there in northeastern Oklahoma. But once again, if you're in the orange shade, you're in a heat advisory. If you're in the purple shade, you're under an excessive heat warning. Big time heat, big heat wave. It's like our second or third major heat wave of the summer that's rolling through the eastern half of the country. We're going to talk about the heat at the end of the video, but we're really going to talk about just the extreme dangers of the heat. Notice, look at the western United States. We finally cleared up. The heat is actually not nearly as intense as it was. We were talking about heat heat indices going all the way up to 115 for some areas, all the way up into the Pacific Northwest. All right, so all of the heat advisories, warnings, watches have been removed. All right, but still in the hills and valleys of Southern California, we still got to talk about really intense heat just because of the summer, just how it is. It's always hot. But yeah, that's what we got to talk about out there. All right, so we're gonna take a look out at now the SPC forecast. This is today's SPC. You can see, all right, in portions of northern Illinois, northern Indiana. You've got also portions of southwestern Michigan and portions of eastern Iowa. You have an enhanced risk of severe weather. That's level 3 out of 5 risk in the orange shade. All right, that's basically what's out for today's event. We're expecting a really intense damaging wind event to unfold across that region, and that's what we've got from the SPC, a level 3 out of 5 risk. That's a pretty elevated risk, so some big time severe storms are expected out there. But you've got 3 slight risks. You've got one slight risk that's kind of just surrounding the enhanced risk in general. All right, you've got a slight risk that's including areas of western Nebraska, northwestern Kansas, and then you have another slight risk. This is actually for that separate event, the secondary event that we were talking about on satellite out there in portions of western New York State, northern PA. All right, that's the level 2 out of 5 risk out there in the slight risk. That's in the yellow shade, and then everybody, it seems like everyone in the northern tier of the country is currently under a marginal risk for severe weather. All right, that's in the green shade. That's level 1 out of 5 risk. All right, that includes a lot of major cities, so big population total with that. But look at the enhanced risk. It's not too big of an area, but you have a population total of just under 17 million people, and that's mainly because you have cities like Milwaukee, Chicago, Peoria. I don't think I'm saying that right. But areas out there in northern Illinois that are a little more populated, like northern Indiana. All right, portions of southwestern Michigan. All right, so if you're in any suburbs of any cities, all right, that's probably why your risk area has such a high population total. It's because you have just so many cities out there with a lot of people in them as well. But we're gonna break this down. So going to the tornado threat, you have a 5% tornado threat. All right, we're talking about a potential QLCS event or maybe even a derecho event that's going to unfold across northern Illinois and the Midwest. But what this tells me, and what this should tell you guys, is that there are embedded tornadoes that are possible today within that line of storms that we're expecting to fire across the region. All right, you have a 5% risk for basically all of the areas that will be hit by the line when it's at its strongest. So that basically just means that the SPC says that there's a 5% chance of a tornado happening anywhere within the line of storm that's going to sweep down from the north and go down to the south into southern Illinois and Indiana. But that's a 5% tornado threat, all right, going out for areas of northern Indiana, northern Illinois, and portions of eastern Iowa. All right, that's in the red shade. That's a 5% risk. In the green shade, that's surrounding areas. You're in the 2% risk for a tornado. Also, look over here near Rochester and Buffalo, New York, our secondary threat for severe weather. You have a 2% risk as well. All right, out there in the green shade, but the main hazard for today, your screen just, brightened up, it lit up. That's because, look at this, we have a 30% hatch damaging wind threat for areas of northern Illinois, northern Indiana, portions of western Iowa, southern Wisconsin, southern Michigan. All right, that's where we have a very, very high damaging wind threat. That's almost a 45% chance. All right, if this were to get upgraded just the slightest, it would be a 45% chance, which that means it would be a moderate risk of severe weather. So we have a very high end enhanced risk so far, but we have a 30% in the red shade. That's where we have a 30% chance of seeing damage wind gusts of 65 knots or greater because that whole area is hatched. So that means that there's a significant chance for severe damaging wind gusts. But you have 3 other 15% risks. They're all for the slight risk areas, so the surrounding areas of the 30%. Then you got the 15% over here in New York State, and then the one over here in Nebraska. And then a 5% surrounding all of this for a big chunk of the northern tier of the country. All right, that's the 5% in the brown and red shade. And look down here into southeastern Arizona. We have a little sneaky 5% risk as well for damaged wind gusts near Tucson, Arizona. Areas just to the east of Phoenix could be in the Albuquerque area. We could definitely get some storms. So just some sporadic storm activity, but I would warn you guys that a lot of these storms I do think are going to have some really major wind gusts. Like I'm talking about the potential for destructive storms. I know 5% seems like what are you talking about? Well, I mean, I'll just say this, that with the setups that we get out there in the desert, our desert storms, they overperform a lot of the time. We don't usually get that many storms, but the storms that do fire, usually one or two of them get very strong. So I'm warning you guys, if you're in the Tucson area, watch out because there could be a very strong storm or two in that general area later today. And then finally, the hail threat for today. Look at that. We have a 15% risk. That's it for the same area of the possible derecho. All right, going out for areas of the Midwest in the yellow shade. All right, you can see we have a 15% chance. So there, just the rain and the precipitation itself could be so strong and just so intense that we could even have embedded small to large hail, all right, in that area. And if we do get a cell that happens, prefrontal cell or whatever, embedded with a possible tornado with that line of storms, I mean, anything can happen. But with the kind of setup that we have, we do have that 15% chance. It's not hatched, so it's not a significant chance, but it is slightly elevated. All right, it does include areas a little bit off to the west. So does that mean that we're going to see more of a tornado threat a little bit earlier? Yes, because hail is often it's put together with tornadoes. So what this tells me is that we're mostly going to see like a supercellular kind of threat for areas a little bit off to the west, like a little bit earlier. But I don't think we're going to necessarily see supercells in general. That the normal supercells that are discrete and stuff like that happens in usually like Oklahoma. I think it's just going to be embedded with the line of storms that's about to fire across the region today. And then you got two other 5% risk areas, the one up here in western New York State near Rochester and Buffalo, and then another one surrounding that 15% chance for today. All right, tomorrow's day two outlook. You have another slight risk. All right, you have a slight risk going out for areas of the Northeast. All right, you can see that we have a pretty broad slight risk going out for pretty much northern New York State, Vermont, New Hampshire, going all the way down through northern New Jersey, through a lot of PA, and then down into the Appalachian Mountain region. All right, but if you're in the yellow area, that's a slight risk, level 2 out of 5 risk. Another slight risk, another sneaky one down for central sections of Nebraska into western Kansas. My friend Roman, the weather guy, I'm sure he's going to get some pretty good storms out there near Garden City, Kansas. But go be sure to check him out because he does some very good live streams, severe weather coverage. Right. But near the panhandle of Oklahoma, you got, still that slight risk. And then just into just far northern Texas up here, you have still this slight risk for tomorrow. And then inside of all this, you have a level 1 out of 5 marginal risk. And then yet again, another sneaky marginal risk. This one down here for southeastern Arizona, pretty much the same exact area as what we're talking about today. So Tucson, you could actually be dealing with 2 days of possible significant storms that could be severe out there in Arizona. So just please be aware of that. All right, we're going to breeze through this quickly, but you have 2% risk areas for tomorrow's tornado threat. All right, damage wind threats 15% for both slight risk areas, and then hail threat it's a 5% for the slight risk out in the Northeast, 15% for the Nebraska and Kansas event. All right, and then finally day 3. All right, we have 2 marginal risk areas, one for the Northeast and one for areas of like the mountainous regions of Colorado, Nebraska, and Wisconsin, Wyoming. All right, but I don't think that we're going to see a very significant event for our day 3, which should be Wednesday. All right, so that's going to take care of your SBC outlook, and we're going to go over here. We're going to take a look at the NAM 3K model for the North Central United States, and we're just going to be breaking down this entire event because there's a lot to talk about in this video with this very significant and very dangerous event that's about to unfold. All right. So we're taking a look here at the 12Z run of the NAM 3K model. You can see that as of this morning, we had some pretty good convection going on here into the Great Lakes region, and then also way up into sections of Minnesota. But watch as we continue to play this through. At the time of recording this video, it's about 3 o'clock Eastern time. So it's about 2 o'clock Central Time. So this is 3 p.m. And look, you already have this little sneaky low that's already dropped down to 1,001 millibars. That's considered very low for a severe weather event, just a regular summer severe weather event. All right, so we've got a very strong and strengthening storm system that's starting to produce some thunderstorm activity. But it's across northern sections of Wisconsin. Oh my gosh, northern sections of Wisconsin and south central sections of Minnesota. Right, that's by 3 p.m. today. Now, as we go forward in time, look as this produces more showers and thunderstorms, and we start to actually see some supercells, possible supercells, but just some storm cells in general. They start to fire across this region. Look, you almost get a train of storms that could be rotating. I do think that embedded tornadoes are definitely possible, especially down here into like sections of northern Iowa, definitely down there into extreme southeastern Minnesota, and then also into northern sections of Wisconsin. I do think that we're definitely going to have the potential to see some tornado warnings go in effect for some of these areas as we get into like the dinner time frame of tonight. And then we see as we progress farther into the night, later into the night, the northern side of the storm really starts to break off and detach. So what you're looking here, this is not going to bother this. This is actually going to kind of just fizzle out because it's going to be moving into an area that's not going to have as warm and moist air, and it's also going to be moving over the Great Lakes, so that could definitely affect it. I don't think that's going to be anything that's going to affect it too crazy, but basically what I'm saying here is that this batch of storms, it's going to be moving its way off to the east as it dissipates, and it's not really going to do anything mess around with that line of storms that we're about to look at later into tonight. All right, but you got 999 millibar low. So now we've got a sub 1,000 millibar low, and this is just a summer storm. This is a storm system that's producing severe thunderstorms in the summer. Typically, you don't really get that strong of a low pressure when you get these summer events, but in this case, you do. All right, so you got a strengthening low by dinner time frame, and we go into the overnight hours. We get to about 9 p.m. Eastern, and you've got a full blown, massive, like I'm talking about a major line of storms that's moving its way through sections of eastern Iowa, southern Wisconsin. But look how sharp this contrast is between no precipitation and maybe the hardest rain people have ever seen out here. I mean, it's really raining. You see these pink shades, these purple shades. I mean, we're talking about DBZ values that could get way up into 60, but it's not even hailing. All right, so we're going to see, torrential rainfall. I think flooding is going to be a huge issue. I'm talking about a huge issue because we've seen just so much precipitation here in the past few days that the ground's going to be so saturated that it can't even take it. All right, but when you look at this and you look at just how sharp this contrast is, it gives you a hint that this is going to be producing damaged wind gusts. This is why we have the 30% chance for damaged wind gusts. Okay, if you're anywhere that's in the way of this line, anywhere in the way of this line, I mean, this line is going to be monstrous. This is going to be a really hungry, a really just nasty line of storms that's going to charge through this area. Nothing is going to stop this. Okay, and we're going to talk about why. We're going to talk about why this environment is just so ridiculously crazy. Just with the strengthening of the storm expected, just how much stronger the storm's going to get. We're going to explain all of that a little bit later. But if you're in the way of this, I mean, you've got to expect really strong wind gusts when you see the contrast as sharp as this. I mean, this is a textbook kind of event that's going on down here. What looks like to be portions of western Iowa and into southern Wisconsin. All right, so as we get later into tonight, this line really just gets big and strong. And I mean, it's so heavy, the rainfall, that look, the NAM's almost glitching out. All right, the NAM's glitching out here just because of how much rainfall it wants to show. I mean, it's going to rain like crazy out there into southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois. All right, sections of southeastern Iowa. It's going to be raining like crazy. You're going to get, I mean, it could be so intense and you could honestly get whiteout conditions just because of how rainy it is and how strong these winds are going to be. But I mean, look how sharp that contrast is, and it stays together. This line is very well built, And you see how it's got like, the core of it is kind of like, straight. All right, this shows you that, I mean, it's a very compact line of storms. The contrast is sharper than ever. All right, and so I do think that if you're in the center of the storm, if unfortunately the center of the storm somehow hits your area, I think you're going to get hit the hardest, because if you look, this area up here north, it's a little bit, bent, if you want to put it that way. That means that, the winds aren't probably as compact as what we're talking about here in northwestern Illinois, where it's mostly just a straight line. All right, but this is by 10 p.m., and you just have insane straight line damaging winds stretching all the way from southern Wisconsin, going all the way down through northern Illinois and into southeastern Iowa. We get into the overnight hours, and this really just continues to produce insane winds, extremely heavy rainfall. You've got a massive bow segment here, and this is what tells me that this can honestly be either QLCS, and I'm not saying this will be a derecho, but it definitely has a potential to be a derecho event. All right, we're gonna just have to see how this plays out. But by 11 p.m., the NAM still wants this really compact, this really strong damaged wind gust line to go all the way up from southeastern Wisconsin, all the way down through northern Illinois, and it's getting a little bit longer, and it's going all the way down now into extreme northern sections of Missouri. All right, this is probably the most aggressive model that I've seen so far, but this is the NAM, and we always, on this channel, I always look at the NAM 3 model for all my breakdowns and stuff. And so the fact that the NAM, this model, I mean, this is a pretty reliable model. Typically, the NAM isn't too crazy with these kind of events, but the NAM is, being the most aggressive with this event. So that just is a little concerning, because the NAM is typically pretty on point. So if it's showing this kind of situation unfolding, that's just something that you want to keep in the back of your mind. All right, but look at this outflow boundary that's starting to actually form here. You can see it on precipitation very so slightly. Just look at that. This big outflow boundary that's starting to form. And we're going to break that down a little bit later as we go zoom in a little bit. But by 11 p.m., I mean, when you see an outflow boundary, you're just seeing more features on this line of storms that kind of just lets you know, like, okay, this is a pretty textbook QLCS or damaged wind gust event, and so you just got to watch out for this. But look how low this low pressure is. I mean, this is a 996 millibar low, and it's a summer storm. All right, and so it goes sub 1,000, and it goes down there pretty quickly. So we're getting to the middle of the night. This line, though, notice here that how the line doesn't look as strong, so it will weaken according to the NAM. It will weaken as it moves past like Chicago, but Chicago, you're going to get hit by the northern side of the storm. Now, it does maintain its strength and actually does become the dominant side of the line, okay? So Chicago may end up seeing some of the brunt impacts, okay? So if you're in Chicago, I would monitor the forecast, but as of right now, the NAM is showing the strongest point of the storm to be the northern side of the storm, which is going to be the side of the storm that's going to impact you guys. But it sweeps through Chicago by midnight, and now it's moving down south. All right, you got some busy, intersections. You got some busy roads down here, some roadways. You've got some interstates down here, and so this is going to be moving right through those areas. And we see just this really small. You see this little small line of just intense precipitation that lets you know that there's some very strong wind gusts along that line. Still an extremely sharp contrast, meaning that there's really no sign of this weakening as far as the wind gusts go, but definitely precipitation value is getting a little bit lower, but this is really moving its way down south, and it's not really slowing down until we get to about the really early morning hours of tomorrow morning, till this finally starts to weaken out. It does not, it goes over 1,000 millibars by 4 a.m. Eastern time. But notice how this line is starting to fizzle out. It's starting to break apart. Really not seeing any of those features that tells you that there's a pretty significant chance for wind gusts. Still, definitely some embedded, severe thunderstorm warnings that are definitely possible with this line. But by 4 a.m., things should start to calm down. Look at this little secondary piece line that's broken off, but still holding up pretty strong. That's moving just to the south, right through the St. Louis suburbs, the St. Louis area. I would watch out for that, all right? So still, a pretty good line of storms, still kind of moving its way down to the south, but nothing like what's going to happen up here into northern Illinois and sections of eastern Iowa. But, probably by 2, 3, 4 in the morning tomorrow morning, that's when this thing's really going to significantly weaken out. All right, but that's not going to be until this gets all the way down to south central Illinois, south central Indiana, and then sections of northwestern Ohio. But I mean, just look at that. I mean, that is really a crazy damage wind gust event. That if this happens, if this plays out, guys, I mean, that's probably the worst case scenario that you just looked at. But a lot of the models are predicting a similar kind of setup happening. Maybe not exactly this strong, but definitely a bow segment. And it's always in the same area. And we saw the SBC. They highlighted the enhanced risks today for that area, and so all the models are really mainly predicting just a bow segment to kind of set up and just move down through these regions with some really strong winds coming down from the north. All right, coming down from like Canada here. All right, some cooler and maybe some drier air to come down from Canada, but it's going to meet up with this really warm and moist surging air from the south. All right, and that's basically where we get the clash and we get the bang. And the bang is going to be this massive damaging wind gust event. All right, so we're going to go over here. We're going to take a look at the NAM 3CAM model once again, but this time we're going to be looking at CAPE. All right, CAPE is convection allowing potential energy. We're taking a look at basically how much thunderstorm juice is what I like to call it. How much thunderstorm juice is in the area out ahead of these storms? How much juice, how much energy is in front of these storms to basically fuel them and help them develop? Well, as of this morning, we didn't have any serious CAPE, but we already did wake up to CAPE levels at around 2,000 joules per kilograms in some of these areas. That's very high, certainly high enough to spark severe weather, and that's by 8 a.m. this morning. All right, so we're not even close to the time frame of when these storms are going to, start to fire, and we already have some pretty high CAPE levels. But just look how these really explode as we get into the late morning and early afternoon hours. I mean, we're already getting over 4,000 joules per kilograms into a lot of areas out there, into Iowa, also down into Missouri, down to Arkansas. I mean, I know Arkansas is going to be a pretty minor state in this event, but look as we continue into the afternoon hours. I mean, we get over 5K joules per kilograms CAPE, 5,000 joules per kilograms. I mean, that's considered off the charts. But I mean, look at this, guys, and it's so widespread. Anybody in this tan shade, 5,000 joules per kilograms of CAPE is considered absolutely unbelievable. But you see these like orange shades, inside like this white and this orange shade. I mean, on the scale, I mean, that's near 6,000 joules per kilograms, which is almost unheard of. So that's basically showing you why this could be such an intense event. It's because of how loaded the atmosphere is going to be. I mean, just look at this. It's crazy how much moisture is there. It's like a ticking time bomb. As soon as we get just a little shower, it's going to explode. And we're going to start out with that, the supercell event, in the very beginning. We're going to get supercells and just storm cells in general that's going to start to, line up, and they're going to move their way off to the east, and slowly they're going to kind of come together and start to form that damaged wind gust line. Now, if CAPE levels out here into northern Illinois, extreme southeastern Iowa, if they weren't that high, we probably wouldn't see such a strong damaged wind gust event because there wouldn't be enough CAPE allowing the storm to continue to produce severe weather, not only having the tornado potential, but also maintaining its severity and transitioning into the damaged wind gust event. If we didn't have the CAPE levels that we have right now, then that wouldn't happen. But that's exactly what we're seeing now, where we're getting those CAPE levels out ahead of the storm as it's going to be, developing the severity with those winds. And I mean, this is what we're going to get. So as we take this out later into this morning, later into this evening and overnight, all right, you can see the contrast gets very sharp between zero CAPE. So, I mean, the atmosphere is going to get wiped out because these storms are going to take in all of the moisture that's left. You go from like zero CAPE to 5,000 joules per kilograms. That's how intense this environment's going to be. And this just continues to sweep through. And still down here into southern Illinois, into Indiana, when this line is going to start to break apart. At this point, the line's starting to break apart, but you still have CAPE levels topping off at 3,000 joules per kilograms, which is considered pretty high. So, I mean, it's still just going to be an absolutely loaded environment for severe weather. But just to show you guys why this is happening, it's all of this. And I mean, there's a lot of other factors to put into play. But when you have 6,000 joules per kilograms of CAPE, you're almost certainly going to have severe storms. I mean, I think it's number one, it's unheard of to have 6,000 joules per kilograms of CAPE, but it's practically impossible to have 6,000 joules per kilograms of CAPE, but also not have any storms. So I mean, it's almost a guarantee at this point that we're going to get some storms, and there's just so much fuel in the atmosphere for these storms that we're expecting a lot of them to go severe. All right, so we're taking a look now. We're zooming in, taking a look at areas just to into the Midwest in the Chicago area. This is areas of like northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin. All right, you've got sections of eastern Iowa there. This is just a high resolution NAM model that we're taking a look at. And so, just to kind of break this down, as we zoom in, all right, you see these little, I don't know, I don't think it's showing, but, or maybe it is, yeah, you see these little, like, these black outlined areas. This is where you have possible storm cells, all right, and you see a lot of them. So, that tells you that there really is a possible threat for tornadoes early on. And notice also that the sharp contrast that I was talking about earlier, excuse me, it's not there. You don't see that. So it's going to start out as a tornado threat off of the NAM. That's for sure. All right, and you see these winds that are coming up from the south. All right, these winds are coming up from the south and they're pushing up into sections of Illinois here, and they're moving basically northeast. All right, and then you're gonna get this line with some really strong winds pushing down from the north. They're gonna be pushing the line and just the line of storms down into Illinois. These winds are going to be coming out from the north, and they're going to be moving to the southeast. All right. When that happens, you're going to get the line to form because you're going to get, the reason why you have the well-defined line is because these winds are going to be so strong that they're basically going to push up against the front of this line of storms. But the reason why it's not going to break is because you have some really strong winds coming from the backside of it too. So you have two different wind directions, and when they meet, that's where you get the storms, and that's basically what's going on here. That's the wind pattern that we're talking about, and that's why this event's going to be so crazy because it's such a textbook event. All right, you see these wind barbs here. I guess the wind arrows. You see how they're really long here. That just shows you that they're really strong. The winds. All right, so you have extreme winds that are moving to the southeast here that are pushing the storm. And then you have these winds that are coming up from the southwest and from the north, from the southwest and the south. And they're pushing up against this line. That's what causes it to have that bow segment, that like bowing echo, the bow echo. So the bow echo itself is the winds coming from behind it that are punching into the line of storms. All right, the reason why it's not like a full curve is because you have these winds coming up from the south that's flattening it out. And that's why you get the intense winds right at the front of that line. So right into here is where you have the strongest winds because that's where you have the backside winds and the prefrontal winds. That's where they meet and that's where they're the strongest, if that makes sense. All right, but look at this. I mean, it's just crazy, how intense these winds are going to be. And you see those little areas where you get like another curve. All right, right into here, that's a possible embedded tornado area. Down here, that's a possible embedded tornado area. Where you have mostly like the flat looking areas here, that's where you're going to get the straight line winds. But anywhere where you see like a curve, all right, any curvature in the line, that's where you're probably going to get the embedded tornado threat. But this sweeps right through northern Illinois. All right, Chicago's right over here, and we see what happens to Chicago. And I mean, this maintains its strength, the northern side of the storm especially. And just wow, look at that. Chicago, according to the NAM, Chicago is about to get absolutely slammed by really strong winds. And you see, even look at these, the wind arrows. You can see they're moving just from the south straight up to the north as you go into southern Illinois. But as soon as they, interact with this line, they all of a sudden just get pushed. They get pushed and they have to, move in this direction now because of this line moving through. So, drawing out this pattern once again, all right, the tension that's going to build here is going to be so intense also with the high cape levels, that this is why we're going to see the intense precipitation and the intense winds right into here. That's basically what we're talking about as for just the setup of this event. But this continues to move through, and then this does go into southern Illinois. I have another friend, Davis Does Weather. I know you guys have probably heard about him. I mentioned him a lot. All right, you're probably Davis. If you're watching this video, you're probably gonna get some pretty intense winds, pretty intense storms, because the leftovers of the storm. I shouldn't even say leftovers. This is still gonna maintain its damaged wind event or like QLCS characteristics, to the point where if you're on this interstate here that rides through South Central Illinois, I mean, you could really get some very strong damaging winds, some really intense rainfall, some just big time severe storms, and so. Definitely Southern Illinois, southern sections, or sorry, central sections of Indiana. Don't count yourself out. Don't count yourselves out, because I do expect this line to maintain its strength as it moves into your area. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the St. Louis area, you guys could get battered with some pretty strong to severe storms later into tonight. But still, the wind directional the wind setup, the wind pattern, it's still going to maintain its its organized presentation, even as this moves down into areas way further south than what's going to happen up into northern Illinois. So that basically just shows you that not only is this going to be such a textbook and such a strong storm, but this is going to maintain its strength pretty far south, and it's going to be just a really long tracking bow segment that we're going to have to talk about and deal with as we get later into today. All right, and so we take a look at your wind gusts here on the NAM. We're taking a look at this model because it's high resolution and it's zoomed in. So we're taking a look at where the NAM is pinpointing like an almost like an epicenter for the strongest winds embedded with the line. All right, and so we see this kind of move through, and there you go. Look at Iowa getting off to a hot start. You look over here, you're looking at 70 knots, which you could argue is about 75-mile-per-hour wind gusts. You're talking about hurricane force wind gusts that are possible all the way out here into eastern Iowa. So right off the bat, the NAM is pointing out two areas out here. These could be supercells, but these could just be embedded with the line of storms that we're talking about. But you have wind gusts that could get up to 70 miles per hour in some of these areas. Also, I'd like to mention up here into sections of western Wisconsin. Look at this. Some areas getting up to about 50, maybe even 60 knots. I mean, 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts are certainly possible up there, but definitely into northeastern Iowa. Earlier on with this event, I mean, you could talk about wind gusts that could top off at around hurricane force winds, which is just absolutely insane. But really strong wind gusts that could get up to hurricane force. And then you look and you can see the contrast really starts to develop here, and just we start to see this entire area that has the line itself, or the entire area, and just the entire section of the line. It's all producing damaging wind gusts. So if you want to go here, I mean, if you want to put, if I want to put my mouse over here, I mean, you can see we're getting the NAM showing some wind gusts that get up to 60 knots, 65 knots. That's up to 70 miles per hour. Right. So, I mean, you also do have the very strong winds coming from the backside. Notice how these aren't even embedded with the line of storms, and you're alone just getting, wind gusts that could be up near 35 knots. All right, that's just from the winds that are pushing the storm to the south. And so that's why, I mean, you have the really high tension, because if you look at the winds coming from the south going to the north, all right, look at this. You have winds that are getting up to 30 knots as well. All right, so if you have 35 knot winds coming from the north, and then you've got like 30 to 40 knot winds coming from the south, and they push together. I mean, you just got to think that you got really high tension, and you got really intense storms that are going to produce some really strong winds, and that's exactly what we're expecting and what we're seeing here on the NAM. All right, but just some really intense winds just all along this bow segment here. That's basically what I want to pinpoint home. Look at this outflow boundary that's starting to sprawl out across sections of Western Illinois. That's definitely going to be an issue for some of you guys. So what's going to happen with that? If you get hit by an outflow boundary, basically what that means is that you're going to get like basically what it is. It's just like it's going to look like a really dark cloud that's kind of, it's going to roll through your area. It's going to be really moving really fast, but it's going to be out in front of the storm by just a mile or so. Really close to the front of the storm, but just about a mile ahead of it. All right, it's going to move through, and you're just going to get all of a sudden a really strong push of wind gusts, just a really strong push. And it's going to be like 5 minutes where you're just going to get some really strong wind gusts. But don't think that that's the main event. All right, if it's not raining, you get the strong wind gusts. You're probably experiencing an outflow boundary. After that, things are going to calm down, and it's going to be dead silent. All right, and that means that the skies are probably getting really dark. Like you could have skies that are going to be turning almost black, and it's going to be really silent, really dark, and just quiet with dead winds. The winds are going to be strong at all. And then all of a sudden, it's going to start raining like crazy. The winds are going to pick up, and that's when you get the main line to come through. That's what we're expecting to happen for some of these neighborhoods and communities out here into northern Illinois. And then look at this. This little section up here of the line, way up into northwestern Illinois. This could go through the Chicago area, another area producing some really strong wind gusts, almost up to 70 miles per hour there. So just to pinpoint this home, the NAM showing a crazy event here, which looks to me like a possible derecho event, producing some really strong wind gusts, up to hurricane force wind gusts possible anywhere embedded with this line of storms. Tornadoes definitely possible, especially out here into sections of eastern Iowa, but this is going to make its way to the south. It's going to move through southern Illinois, southern Indiana, still producing some very strong winds, and yeah, it's going to be pretty much it. All right, so taking that away, all right, you've got the setup that's still, bringing in some very intense temperatures. But like I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the video, we've been talking about a really, really brutal and intense heat wave that's been affecting the country in the past few days. So I know a lot of people want to know, when is this heat going to end? Well, we look at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. This is from the Climate Prediction Center. This was issued today, all right, and this was issued yesterday. This is valid for July 20th to the 24th. All right. I don't know what day that's gonna be. I think that's just gonna be like the weekend. I think this weekend into early next week. So this is just the temperature forecast. All right. So we start in the northeast. You're still gonna hang on to slightly above average temperatures, but notice how it's nothing compared to what we're talking about now. We're talking about well above average temperatures out there, almost record-breaking temperatures out there as of right now. You're not going to see that as of July 20th to the 24th. You're going to see still above average temperatures, just barely above average. So, about 33 to 40% chance of seeing above average temperatures, so about leaning above average for you guys out there in the northeast. All right, everyone in the gray shade, you're near normal with your temperatures. That's where we want to be. But look at this. You're going to get a really good break from temperatures out there if you are in the central plains. You get a really big area of below average temperatures that's going to form out there, and centered around Oklahoma, in the southern Missouri, northern Arkansas. So the central plains, believe it or not, you guys may actually get a pretty significant break from the intense temperatures, and we could see temperatures get to as low as 70 to 80% below average out there, and that's centered right in the Great Plains. So I think you guys are actually going to get a pretty significant break by July 20th to the 24th, and this spreads out very far throughout all the central United States, all the way into Texas. What does this mean? Well, you're going to see mostly comfortable temperatures, comfortable conditions. This is most likely going to reduce. This is going to reduce humidity, so you're not going to see the sticky and disgusting air. You're probably going to see some drier air with this, and that ultimately is going to most likely reduce the chance for severe thunderstorms. So yes, this could also mean that we're going to see a lower threat, a lower threat for severe thunderstorms in general from July 20th on. So that's a very good thing to look at here from this outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. As for the Western United States, well, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. You guys are going to stay really hot, especially up here into the Pacific, the mountain northwest, near Montana. Look at this. I mean, you've got a really intense area of 80 to 90 degrees, 80 to 90% chance of seeing above average temperatures way up here into Montana. But look at this, just the entire western half of the United States, colored in these, tropical, these warm-looking colors. This is where we're expecting some well above average temperatures to continue. So we're probably going to see another heat wave develop here, and it's going to start out on the west coast. What does this mean? Well, it does mean that as we get into late, like the very, very late, days of July into the very early days of August, we could see a third heat wave or fourth heat wave for some develop on the West Coast or just the Western United States. And as we get into August, this could actually move into the Central and Eastern United States. So I'm warning you guys. This does mean that there's a potential another heat wave that's on the way. But as of right now, we're expecting that after this heat wave that we're in right now, that severe weather and heat will slowly start to kind of calm down, and we should return back to normal, like a normal summer, for at least a couple of days from July 20th to the 24th, especially in the central United States and on the East Coast. All right. So, just to take a look at the temperatures now, this is the last part of the update. We're going to look at the heat index that's going on right now. This is today. All right. You're looking in the southwestern United States. We're going to breeze through this pretty quickly. But today's heat index, guys, I mean, just to show you, I mean, it's absolutely insane. 118 degrees. All right, feels like 118 out into southwestern sections of Arizona. It feels like 110, 105. So, notice that it's still brutally intense heat, especially for areas near like Death Valley, like the hills and valleys of Southern California, like the desert regions of Arizona. But, it's nothing like what we saw earlier this week, or sorry, I should say last week. All right, I think that heat wave's definitely over at this point, and I think we're gonna get some pretty average temperatures as of today, and then into the next few days of this week. So I think you guys are gonna be okay. It's still gonna be pretty hot, but I think you guys are gonna be pretty okay if you're in California. It's still gonna feel very, very hot, but I do think that the most of the heat, like the really intense heat, like the dangerous heat, it's going to stay to the north. I do think some areas in the northwest could get a little bit hot, especially down into also into the southwestern United States. But for the core of the western United States, you guys should be okay as far as the heat goes. But just still some really intense heat for some of these areas. But I do think once again that the heat's going to be a little bit less of an issue in the next few days. But like I said earlier, watch out for that heat wave that's going to be starting to form as we get into like the July 20th time frame. So we go over now to the central United States. This is centered around the Midwest here. And we're talking about some really intense heat out there as well. We already do have, like I said, like I mentioned earlier in the video, right, we do have heat advisories going out for some of these areas. You can see, we're talking about heat indices going up to over 100 degrees for many of these areas. I mean, look at St. Louis, 110, Southern Illinois, about 110. Everybody out here in this gray shade, you're getting well above 100 degrees with those heat indices. But some areas out here, some areas into Kansas, Oklahoma, into, Illinois, into sections of southern Iowa, and then even into sections of Missouri. All right, everyone out here has a very good shot at seeing a heat index of 110 degrees. So I think that the most intense heat of the day is definitely going to be across the central United States. And we take this out. This is the HRRR, so it's only going to go out 48 hours. But we take this out for today. And then here comes your storms. That's why we see the major decrease. The storms are gonna, bring down those temperatures just because they're going to suck up all that warm air. But is the heat going to return into tomorrow? Well, yes, but it's going to be pushed farther south because remember, the winds from coming from the north, pushing that big bow segment, the big damaged wind storm, is that those winds that are going to be pushing it to the south are going to be bringing some much cooler air from Canada, and that's why we see much more average temperatures return to areas of the Midwest, and we see areas to the south stay warm, but not nearly as hot as what it's going to be like today. So today's going to be the final day of this really extreme heat wave, I would say, for you guys out in the central United States. Because look at this. I mean, you're getting back down all the way to the 50s out here. Look at that. 48 degrees. Look at that. 49 degrees. Oh my gosh. Wow. So really intense, I mean, just a strong cold front is all I got to say. But a really intense heat that's going to stick with us today. But by tomorrow, things are going to start cooling down and we're going to return back to normal. And finally, for the last part of the update, we take a look at the East Coast for things. All right, we go through today. I mean, you can see everybody's over 100 with your heat indices all up and down the East Coast. New York City, 105. Boston, near 100. Look at this in the Carolina coastline. almost 110. That's like portions of Illinois there, but PA, areas inland, you're still talking about right around 100 degrees for a heat index. And then all the way out to tomorrow. Tomorrow, I think, is going to be the biggest day as far as heat goes for the East Coast. And you can see we get right up near 100 degrees once again, 110 for a lot of these areas. Look at Long Island here, my area, almost getting up to 110, especially in those cities. If you're near any major cities for today and tomorrow, I'm warning you, it's probably going to be really hot, and I do think that you could actually be hotter than surrounding areas because you're going to be, obviously right by a city. But that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for coming to watch. I'll see you guys next video. I apologize that took so long, but I just need to really make sure I, hammered that home and just gave you guys that information because I'm really worried about what's going to happen with this big damage one gust event. There's still a few question marks out there, still some model disagreements, so we're just going to have to see what happens. But please just remember to stay safe, stay weather aware, don't be scared, be prepared, and please stay cool with this major heat wave coming on. But some areas will definitely return to below average heat before you know it. So once again, thank you for coming to watch, and I'll see you guys in the next video.